is an accessible city current state. And again, I'll hand over to you, Pauline.
Thank you. So this is a report about, it's not actually about detail of any of the projects, it's just about the timing so that we can bring these works, particularly around High Street, forward so that it will align with any development that's happening there and the streets will not need to be dug up again. There is a mention of the tram project there. There's no detail about that tram work at the moment, but whatever happens, wherever that tram goes, this money will need to be spent. The tram is not part of the AAC budget. The tram is a different budget and the money is in budget. The AAC just relates to the renewal works in High Street. There's the issue of the two weighing of Kilmore and Salisbury. To defer that and just do the piece along Kilmore ready for the opening of the town hall. If we were to proceed with the two weighing, that would be much later, and it adds a whole complication to the works around Victoria Street and all the intersections. So that would be quite a long delay in that. And the other thing to note is the 30k speed limit to go out for engagement on St Asaph Street. Actually, I think it's consultation. And the engagement on Victoria Street to recommence. Victoria Street has already been consulted on, and I think that was a really good process through the ITI committee. I think it was 2016. And there was really good engagement on that. I think people are pretty happy with where we got to. The thing is with Victoria Street, it's failing. The surface needs to be redone on the road and the footpath, so we either dig it up and replace it as it is or proceed and engage with the people and perhaps bring some improvements in there. And one of the additions to the recommendation was that we look at options to connect the Rapanui Shag Rock cycleway to the 30k central city zone, because this had been overlooked. So I'm happy to move these recommendations as well.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for it? Mike Davidson. Is there any discussion? Questions?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand why we're doing this now ahead of the consultation on the LTP, and it does seem a bit odd that we would change timing until we've had that community feedback.
I think the idea through the draft, or through the resolutions before you, is to go out and get some feedback from the community, so potentially you can amend the LTP, for instance, to bring forward High Street redevelopment by another year. So that's the idea of going out before the LTP is approved by council.
Sorry, we've just approved the draft LTP yesterday, which has already agreed to these timing changes, consistent with what's in this report.
So the report itself, so last year at council during the annual plan, council agreed to bring forward the redevelopment of the tram up High Street, and as Councillor Cott had noted, that's not an AAC project. That is a separate line item within the LTP. So what this sought to do was align the adjacent streetscape works with the brought forward tram redevelopment. Now, there is potential to bring that forward, both of those forward yet another year, but before doing that we need to engage with the property owners along there and the operator of the tram to find out, particularly in relation to when the hoardings are going to be removed, if it's possible to do that redevelopment in the next financial year. Right. So that's the reason for the resolution. Two
other questions. One is that part of Victoria Street comes into the local community board, and I don't think this report's been to the local community board. Is there a reason? What's the process around that?
So the resolution in front of you for Victoria Street is to do a report on that, so it's not seeking to reinitiate it. The money is currently in the 15 to 25 LTP, but that would be carried forward into the 18 to 28 LTP, because we're not going to deliver the works this financial year. So as part of that process in developing that report for Victoria Street, we would engage with the community board.
So do you think it would be useful under point 3 to actually make reference to a report going to the community board?
it would be inherent in whatever we do, but
Okay. And just the final question is, we've got some of the costs associated with the AAC just seem horrific, like Hereford Street, for $4 million for 2 blocks. What ability do we have to A, look at the entire Accessible City program and actually see if the benefits and what we thought would happen have happened, and 2, look at reducing the scope in terms of saving some money given our financial pressures, because we still seem to be spending a huge amount of money for very short distances in a city centre that's evolving, and we've never reviewed it since it was launched.
so there's a couple of things there. AAC is a chapter of the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan, and that still has kind of statutory weight under the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act. So I think that the plan itself still has legal status, so reviewing that is something which is a wider question. In terms of the program of works themselves, the first $72 million of that was heavily funded by the Crown. So that both came from Sierra and New Zealand Transport Agency, and I think the first suite of projects were circa 60-65% funded by the Crown. So I think that was very positive for this organisation to receive that degree of funding for those initial projects. I think that the costs associated with the projects are simply dependent on the quality of the work that is done, and certainly some of the builds that are out there at the moment are of a reasonably high quality, and that's got a direct bearing on what costs there are there. There's also underground infrastructure and other things associated with that, but the costs are simply the costs of what we need to do to make the street look in accordance with what's envisaged within the regeneration plan and what's set out within the Inaccessible City chapter.
Okay. I'd like to speak to it when we're in debate.
Okay. Any other questions? Dion, then Glenn.
What is the TP 30 kilometre exactly?
So TP was an abbreviation for Transport Project. So everything with TP in front of it simply stands for Transport Project. And the 30K is simply the slow zone within the core of the central city. So that's the suite of projects that you'll see where once you enter into that slow core, it tells you as the driver of a vehicle that you're entering into a 30K zone.
And that costs $3 million to do?
Well, that's the budget, and some of that work has been done and some of it's ongoing. You would have seen some of those being rolled out throughout the city, but there's signage, there's treatment, there's build outs, there's various other things that are occurring within the TP30 project.
I'll speak to that in a minute. But the other one, have you spoken to Richard or Mr. Peebles about his development at all?
Yes.
So you would already know when he's looking to plan to take away because you just said before that this is effectively giving you resolution to go out and speak to him. So I mean, what is this actually?
You've
already done that by the sounds of it. So what is that actually asking us to do?
So he's one of the developers which are along High Street. There's other developers that we'd need to speak to as well, and we'd need to speak to the operator of the tram.
And the water community.
Okay. I mean, it was.
Has there been a misunderstanding about the two projects? Because one in this paper relates to the AAC project, which is the street treatments on the area where the tram tracks would go. The tram tracks are not part of AAC, so that's a separate project. I felt when I read about this elsewhere that it was. It seemed to misunderstand the two projects, and that we're actually trying to help align the two projects.
That's the purpose. So as Councillor Cotter mentioned, we don't want to dig up the street twice. So if you lay the tram tracks, we don't want to come along and do the streetscape works at a later date.
That's
so
right.
what this sought to do was bring forward the AAC component of the works for High Street to align with what was proposed for the tram. But there is a possibility of bringing both of those projects forward even further, but that will be dependent on some of that engagement which we just discussed.
And that was actually the next question I had, was how are you going to do that? Because obviously the budgets are in financial year 19 at this stage. How are we going to bring the budget forward? Is it going to be an LTP conversation, or is it something else that we're missing?
So that would be as part of a staff submission to the LTP or through. So the money is programmed, so there's no new money. It's simply a matter of changing which year we can deliver it in. So it's not new money or different money or greater or lesser amount. It's simply a matter of a transaction that goes into the LTP to say, well, if we can deliver in 1819 as opposed to 1920, that would be preferable. But I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we discuss that not just with one person but with other people who also have interests along there and find out what their development ambitions might be. We also have a couple of heritage buildings which are currently propped along there. They've been down there, the heritage facades, they've been that way for obviously a long period of time. The issues are, particularly with one of them, are very vexed and complex. And so before we get in to do our works, some of those hoardings, all of the hoardings, will need to come down.
Yeah.
Is that on the other part of High Street you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not the actual...
Yes, but you wouldn't really want to think of High Street in isolation, as in tram track, nothing. Tram track.
The other question is, the other question I have here, is there going to be any look at that ridiculous intersection at Chewham Street while we're actually doing this work, or is it still going to be the 21 traffic lights intersection?
I'd like to second that.
I think we're having a few more.
I'm actually being deadly serious. It's one of the most ridiculous intersections in the city.
I think
it's actually not the most ridiculous one I've ever seen, but it's getting
one
up there.
of them.
to answer your question, I think you raise a good point, because there are options for the tram and where it goes, and the intersection, if we are to take the tram up through there and up to the top end of High Street past Ara and the Duncan's buildings, that intersection and how it operates is going to be pretty fundamental to what's proposed as part of this program.
Right. Well, Aaron will take the traffic lights.
Yeah.
Glenn. Glenn.
Thanks. Yeah, my question was just over the, if you like, the kind of the display of the, get the screen back, display of the costs, Richard. So do we always show the breakdown between Crown and Council in our tables? I mean, this one obviously looks like Council, but, you know, so Yanni has a comment over, he used these words, gold plating. Does that include the gross cost of Crown
That's
Council?
gross. So with the first suite of projects, the 72 million, we got 27 was funded by the Crown, and then a further 18 by NZTA, and we funded the remaining 27 million, so circa 63% was funded by the Crown.
63.
So for the second phase of projects, we went through a business case process, which is a requirement of the New Zealand Transport Agency for any funding of projects over $1 million.
Okay.
They have endorsed our program business case for an accessible city, but that always comes with a caveat that, you know, any new projects they'll be looking at and seeing what the transport benefits, because they're a transport agency. So, you know, some things they fund more than others. And as we were discussing earlier, when it leads to transport efficiencies, you know, for people getting from A to B quicker, that's certainly something that they're keenly interested in. And so that's the type of thing that they look at in terms of funding.
And the way we report it, do we always consistently just show the council component, or does it tend to be both in our reports?
No,
we
just
show
council.
Sorry?
Just council.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Raf.
Thank you. A couple of questions here. So Victoria Street, you've still got in here at 5.5 million. I thought that had been deferred. That 5.5 million is.
It is in this year's budget under the annual plan this year.
But we're not spending it this year, are we?
No.
So we'd need to.
So it would be carried forward.
And that is going to go back for some review.
So the idea is to prepare a report for the organisation to consider. While we haven't prepared that, I think it should have some options to it, so it needs to be an options assessment. So that would be, you might look at it, as Councillor Cotter mentioned, there's certainly some issues on Victoria Street with the quality of the asset. So you might look at just a straight renewal to have a like-for-like replacement of what's there at the moment. So we need to look at, well, what would the costs of that be in comparison with doing something which is what's proposed through AAC, and you know, how long would that take as well to deliver, because there might be similar timeframes to what's proposed as part of this project. So that's the idea, is to bring something back to you on that with a range of options.
Good. Okay, that's good. On the, I mean, the general cost. I mean, as Yanni and Dion raised, kind of, you know, we seem to have this kind of gold plate, this kind of coffee and croissant, this bread and butter, and maybe a kind of water and crackers.
This is coffee and
scale of expenditure. Now, at next week's Finance Committee, we're having a report back on one of the AAC projects, which was that Hereford Manchester to Madras piece, which was budgeted at 2.4 million, came in at 900,000. And we're going to examine why that happened. So I think, you know, some of these costs do need to be looked at. I mean, there is a sense that stuff's been over-engineered more than it needs to be, and I think we really need to have a good look at that. So I hope that is happening through this committee.
So,
I mean,
just
we'll
comment
see
on
what
that.
happens next week, but I think, you know, we've had it with some of our pedestrian crossings and whatever. Some of the quotes we get, and then some of the final prices come in way lower. So it worries me if we're over budgeting for a lot of this stuff. Anyway,
full street renewals are expensive, but in terms of the Hereford Street redevelopment, one of the reasons why it came in lower than the originally anticipated cost was because some of the work was actually done by Atakara, so we don't have to do the full suite of works associated with that. So that's one of the main reasons why.
Did they not charge us for that?
They delivered it as part of the East Spring project.
So our original budget, when we originally budgeted for it numerous years ago, we assumed that we'd have to do that portion of the work. We didn't, so hence the budget came in significantly under.
But in actual fact, the only bit that they were, that we were legally liable for anyway, was the
122 metres.
Well, yeah, it was from east of the east frame, well, from the park through to Latimer Square.
Yeah. And
Is that right? Yeah, and we were to tidy up that corner as well.
Yeah, and there was
and we got them to do it, but I thought we paid for that.
There were some other benefits as well with contractors and continuation of work. So, but that's all in that report.
I shall be very interested to read that report.
We did pay for it, and basically by us joining with them, it cost us a lot less. But also they've upgraded. When you go into those streetscapes, particularly in town, we also upgrade the infrastructure, and they have done a huge amount of upgrade, particularly in the stormwater networks as part of Manchester Street, and so we were able to tag on the end of that as well, and that's one of the issues that we've got with the likes of Hereford Streets. Victoria Street, I think, is another one that the infrastructure, what you see, is broken, but also what's under the ground is.
Yeah, I think people were a bit sad to see Orion digging straight back into the brand new pavement straight after that work had been completed, which was exactly what we're trying to avoid by getting them to do it all at the same time.
And there's still holes open there.
yeah, I would also agree around that. You know, the 30k stuff. I'm not too sure about that. But if you went outside, you'd struggle to find any car going 30 to 35 k's out.
Always travel at
it's a lot
30k
of
or
money.
under.
Just paint
certainly be looking at.
Just paint some things on the ground.
No, it's not.
Hold on.
I understand. It's not just as simple as, people think. But anyway, but anyway, there are treatments that are being applied to the roads as well as build outs and things like that actually say to people, I remember when we first had, because remember, it wasn't us that put the 30k zone on the central city. It was central government that did. I'll send you around the order in council if you like, signed by Jerry Brownlee, and Yeah, it's the best way to but the point is that, you know, at the time I said, why don't we have just large signs just saying you're entering a 30k area? And then, so there's no question that every intersection at the point that you're going in, that you're entering it. Well, it's starting to look like that now. And it wasn't for a long time. Anyway, yeah, Dion, you had a question.
Can't believe it. The resolution number 4 on here wasn't in the original report, but it's up here for a recommendation here. How was that missed? You mentioned it was.
Oh, hang on. The committee had put that in.
Yes, I know, but from the original committee, it wasn't there. So,
yes.
And you mentioned that it had been missed off. I mean, I just want to know how it was, or overlooked, or whatever the word you use. But I just want to know how that got overlooked.
Well, I don't think that it's the staff that overlooked it. It was the committee considered it and felt that it was absent.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what the committee's for.
So the committee, that's how the committee works. I mean, if you're sitting around a committee table, you're working it through with staff.
Well, can I?
And somebody raises the options for connecting the cycleway to the 30k central city zone. Well, that seems a perfectly valid addition. I don't think it suggests that anyone's not paid attention to it.
The staff said before.
AAC never covered all of the roads, and we were doing all the other cycleways, and this seemed to be the anomaly. So the committee picked that up and asked us to investigate options for it. So there was AAC just doesn't cover every single road within the 4 avenues.
No, it doesn't.
So, yeah.
So my question, Leanne, really here is: are there any others? Because we're making a paper like this today around where AAC is at. I just don't want to hear that we've got to do any more anomalies, so we actually are going to have... The question is...
debate or questions.
The question is...
No.
I asked the question. I ask, are we going to hear of any more anomalies so that we end up having to pay for more work?
This is requesting staff investigating options for connecting a cycleway. It's been picked up by the committee as an issue that wasn't identified in AAC. So that's all. I think people forget that AAC is a chapter of the Central City Recovery Plan.
Yeah, and we asked specifically at the time if there were any other cycleways coming in that weren't connected, and there weren't.
Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
So it was this was the only one that was missed.
Great. That was all I was asking, for Christ's sake.
Can I just clarify, get clarity? Is this the Worcester Street connection? Is that the piece of road that we're talking about? The one that comes in, is it the one that comes in Worcester Street? Yeah. So I think it may be quite useful to actually identify the street that's being looked at.
Staff. I think it's okay. Yeah. So it just needs to come in from there.
Staff are aware of which area we're talking about. It's where you connect into the 30k zone. They're not connected in from Ashburton.
Yes, but
just say
presumably you're bringing the options back to the committee, are you? Right. Yep. I don't think it matters right now that we specifically identify which streets might be involved. So, Jamie, question?
Yeah, just on one there, and it's Pauline actually might be able to help me out with that one. What's the point of having one in there really? Because obviously the issues that are covered, pretty basic. The 30k's on South Street makes sense with the school and everything like that, and everything else there, and the fact that you can't go 31k's there anyway, probably. And the other ones again are belts and braces like the High Street, and it's essentially just doing work to coincide with developments to really back the Accessible City program when there are so many question marks over it, particularly what's all the balls that are up in the air with Victoria Street, and also a number of the ones on the amended program that you've got here, which are reasonably comprehensive, like Manchester to Cambridge of Hereford Street, and the Worcester Street one with Montreal to Rolleston, and there's a couple of others there. It's hard to, from where I'm sitting anyway, to say, yep, sign off that amended Accessible City when we don't know what that stuff looks like. We know what the Victoria Street one looked like, and it ended up being quite controversial when we've shelved it. But to then just say, yes, everything else looks good without seeing what they looked like feels counterintuitive. Or is that not what that's saying at all?
I can perhaps speak to that one. What it's seeking is, it doesn't get into the detail of what the works look like, it's simply adjusting the program. And I think to perhaps speak to Councillor Swig's query earlier on, what we'll need to do, and what we've done already, this is probably the third time, is continue to look at and adjust the Accessible City program, because the way when the blueprint was originally put out, we expected anchor projects and other things to have been developed, and the first tranche of projects was designed to align with that. That's not what's played out in the ground, and development has occurred across different parts of the city that probably wasn't thought about originally. So what we've done is brought this back to you to say, hey, firstly it was the bus interchanges opening earlier, and we adjusted the program to make sure that the buses could get into the interchange. Now, as part of this paper, we've got other development occurring in, for instance, places like High Street, and we think, as do you, it's a good idea to align the streetscape works with the tram works.
Yep.
So there might be other changes that need to occur to the program in the future to align with development, because thinking changes 5 years on.
That's helpful, but what you've said actually probably aligns to where my thinking's at, but that almost sounds like one should really be reading, Council acknowledges that the Accessible City program is a moving feast.
Well, for me, I've always thought of the program itself as being a moving feast, but what this is saying is the key things in 6.1 are that what we're seeking your approval to is to push out Salisbury-Kilmore and to bring forward Colombo, the soft wiring of Colombo with the so it connects with Papanui Parallel Cycleway, and the High Street development. Now, there might be further amendments to those in a few years' time, when it might be a good idea to bring something else forward and push something else out.
So it's not fundamentally, this will give me comfort then, it's not necessarily locking us into a number of the other upcoming projects.
That's correct. And what
that aren't stated into ABC.
Yeah, and this is not...
But is that right? I mean, is taking on what everyone has said, shouldn't 18324 zap up into the proposed action projects with modified timing, and note that the budget allocation is in this financial year and won't be spent in this financial year, and then say that it will be subject to a further report to the ITI committee for decision by council? Isn't that right? We're not approving the current continue with project as identified in the current program.
Because they're going to come back to us anyway.
Because they're going to come back. So wouldn't it be better to shift that up into the top block?
In the table.
On page
in
32.
the table, on page 32, where it says, deliver the AAC program in accordance with table 2 below. Oh, table 2 below.
Attachment 1. Yeah, 6.1.
Yeah.
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 We can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Victoria Street is down to be delivered this financial year. However, it was agreed to put the Accessible City projects on hold for a while.
Yeah.
And rather than us try and, as part of this, which is seeking your approval to reactivate the program with some amendments, kicking straight back in and delivering Victoria Street, we think it's important that we go out and speak with the owners and developers down there, give some options, bring that back to council.
So, well, maybe if you've got, approves the continuation of the Accessible City, blah, 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 and then put in brackets at the end of that one, so after report, go bracket, noting project 18324 AAC Victoria Street continues to be on hold. Because it's not, we're not authorising you to continue with the project as identified in the current program.
No, but and the rest of the stuff, like the lower portion of that table there, apart from the 30 kilometre one, all of those are going to be coming back to council anyway, though, are they not? Yeah.
The only issue with putting that statement is that we do want to engage on Victoria Street,
and we want you to too.
Yeah.
Until well, okay, continues to be subject to further engagement with a report back to...
Due back to ITI.
Yeah. Due back to ITI.
Yeah.
I don't know when.
The original resolution asked us to talk to key stakeholders, and so that's what we're doing then, bringing that report back. So certainly we've got no issues if you want to put the physical works on hold, but we'd like permission to go out and talk with those stakeholders and we've already done 2 rounds of consultation with the stakeholders. We've already done a round about how we're going to deliver it, and we just want to go back out there, have a talk, and then bring you all that information back, including the condition of the assets.
No, engagement.
Engagement, subject to further engagement.
And report back to the executive.
Can I just check? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the owners and the businesses and those kind of things and engaging on the delivery. But actually, the owners of Victoria Street are the citizens of the city, and there are many other stakeholder groups who are really interested. I know that Gen Zero, for example, had a petition of over 800 signatures on Victoria Street when it first came to council.
Yes, and we've got a
so making sure the transport liaison
$5 million, and
yeah, no, I'm just checking that when they're engaging with stakeholders,
we'll be making a decision around different
full
options.
Consultation on this.
No, I'm not asking that.
I'm just
all I'm saying is that when they talk to the business owners, they should also be able to talk to the other stakeholder groups.
They do talk to them. They talk to the residents, and they talk to the
they just hadn't been mentioned this time
groups.
round. It had been all about the businesses. That's all.
No
I was
one
just
mentioned
checking.
the businesses.
Oh, I think
Yeah, it was several times.
But just as an example.
Everybody be engaged in this. So
Yeah.
we've done the work on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, don't worry. Let's let it lie. So, okay.
Ian, can I just make a point in relation to the wording in 1? It implies it's on hold. In effect, work is still being done in planning. So, and it's in a timeline. So, I just think to actually go out and say, look, this is on hold, isn't actually entirely true.
Yeah,
there's a plan in the process.
The physical works are on hold.
Well, that's clear.
Say delivery of.
Yeah.
Maybe delivery then.
I'm sorry, the trouble is, and again, it's because we don't have the program in front of us, per se. It's difficult to know what the project as identified in the current program. I mean, maybe if it had said as amended by resolution of council on X date, then it would have been clear that you don't have authority to proceed with the project. But it doesn't say that, and it looks like it's the same as everyone else. I mean, the council may in fact decide that actually just restoring what's wrong with the road will be good enough, and that won't be gold plating or betterment in an environment where it probably, when I think of all the streets and areas of the town that I drive through, what they need to have done to them, I know where I'd rather be spending the money myself. So, it's just, it is going to be a question about some of the work that we have to do rather than the work that we might like to do.
That's clear to us.
So, Leanne, can I just ask then, for clarity, that in fact, that clearly some of the work on Victoria Street is proceeding. We're not going to get the detailed design until it comes through the committee. So it's just, after Victoria Street, it's just subject to further engagement.
Yeah, it's noting construction, noting delivery. Don't have the word construction.
I'm just asking that we
noting have the delivery on project is on hold, subject to further engagement and report back to the IT committee.
Well, I'm really saying it doesn't need to be on hold per se. The actual delivery.
Delivery's on hold. Yeah. Right. It'll be an interesting debate when that report comes to the council, for sure. Do you have a question, or you want to speak to the debate? Okay, well, I'll open it up to debate, and I'll call Yanni because he asked first. No?
There's three of you now. As Jerry Brownlee once famously said, who is he?
He knows who Ref means.
Anyway, so I don't have an identity crisis. I'm very comfortable with who I am. But just to say that, like, I look at the costs in this program, and I'm just baffled at how we can continue to put such huge amounts of money into what I think is a very dynamic environment. We've just seen ECAM propose to reduce the number of bus services in local communities based on what I believe is a failed hubs and spokes model, which a number of us raised concerns at the time it was introduced. As a councillor, we were told that the accessible city was based on the hubs and spokes model, and that's why we had to spend the money that we're being told we have to spend on the central city, so that the buses work. The buses are not working. We've got a broken public transport system at the moment, and we're still going on this path of spending huge amounts of money and gold plating the central city. I'll just give you two examples. Worcester Street, right outside here, we're going to spend another nearly $2 million fixing the road between Oxford Street, Oxford Terrace and Rolleston Avenue. Is that really a priority for us? What's wrong with it? Just the other day, I drove down Park Terrace on my way to council. That's on budget, not on this next 3 years, but in 5 to 6 years out. We've got money on budget to spend millions upgrading Park Terrace when it's just had its resurfacing. I cannot understand, given our financial pressures, why these streets are continuously getting a huge amount of money being spent in terms of capital, when actually there doesn't seem to be a lot wrong with them in some cases. There's others that do need fixing, and I support fixing them, but not gold plating. The other cost that's hidden here from these expensive and what I believe are luxury items is the ongoing OPEX cost of maintaining them, which we don't have any information, but which I consider will be significant. So therefore, until we review the accessible city plan, then I do not believe we should continue to contribute huge sums of money to what was effectively a government-enforced plan on us as a city that I think is clearly failing. So let's review the plan before we spend more money on it. Let's try and get some examples of realistic costings to do the things that we need to do without the luxury items. I conclude with the example I gave to you yesterday. Go to Littleton Farmers Market on the weekend. Look at a very simple, priceless and probably cost-effective solution. They simply close the road to allow the farmers market and the community and the public to go in and feel safe. What a great solution that has almost no cost to it compared to the money that we're spending in this program that's being proposed today. Let's start thinking creatively about how we can save money given our financial pressures, rather than continue to blindly fund the Accessible Central City program without any review.
Phil.
Well, look, I think it's good to have had this discussion today. Some of the councillors might like to come along to the committee at that time rather than sort of relitigate. I think clearly a lot of the points have been useful, but it just seems to me that altogether, like for example, the point about the hub and spokes model, that's actually irrelevant. The point is that we are designing within Accessible City some clear bus corridors, no matter what model we use. That's what has to happen there. All of this stuff is really tidying up stuff. The point about actually including and finishing off the Rapa Nui Shag Rock, why on earth would we not do that? And the same with St Asaph Street, the 30k there. Like it's absolutely clear that in terms of safety for pedestrians coming across the road in St Asaph and for children coming across the road, it's when the school goes in, that in fact that's essential. Who on earth really wants to delay the works around the town hall so that we open the town hall and they're not done? Okay, so overall, I think I do invite councillors to come along at the committee stage to ask these questions. But altogether, I think that the recommendations up there are something that, as a council, we must support.
Glenn.
Yeah, what really concerns me with what I hear is the one dig principle that Skirt aimed for, and which they were never really truly able to attain. So once they dig up a street, that's it. It's all done at once, and it's been talked about as something which is to be aimed for, but never actually reached. So I mean, it's that kind of methodology or lack of it, which I think adds tremendous cost to some of these projects, arguably. So if we are going to proceed with this, my understanding is we're making changes within something that's already agreed. So let's get it right. That would be my plea in this. I do have to agree over the town hall. You can't have the town hall looking good and then the street outside looks like a construction site. We need it all done together. I hear Yanni's point. He's kind of on message. We hear him time and time again over gold plating. I could make the same argument over, you know, water issues. Yeah, maybe all along there was a structural disconnect when the council 2 terms ago was told that the priority was the 4 Avs, whereas the city is the whole city. Some things you can challenge and change, some things you have to live with, but let's try and do this as well as we can and keep the costs down by having that one big principle.
Somebody else. Yeah, was it you, Dion? Dion and then Aaron.
I agree with some of the points that were just said before. You know, we need to be doing the town hall, you know, working, you know, we've heard in this that bringing some of these projects together actually has operational efficiencies. But I just look at, there are some things in here that I agree with and some things that I don't necessarily think are needed or at the level that I think we're funding them at, and I think Hereford Street would be an example of this at the moment. You know, there's quite a lot of money on the budget in there for that, and do we need to be doing that exactly at that level at this time? Is that what the people of the city are wanting at this stage? I struggle with that, and I also struggle with that nearly $3 million to do the traffic enhancements for the 30-kilometre zone in the central city. Is that necessary at this time when we've got so many other pressures? I just don't feel that that is the right thing we should be doing. I mean, paint 30-kilometre on the road, and how much can that cost? If that's what we wanted to do. I don't think we need to be doing all these build-outs and everything like that at this stage. I think the tram, bringing that forward is a good idea. I think that was, but again, that was resolved in the annual plan, and I thought it would have been better to come well before the long-term plan was being discussed, and which is what I thought was going to be happening. So it's a bit of a shame of the timeline on that. But roadworks are so tricky for people in the city at the moment. I think they're at that level, they're at that tolerance, and I don't think people are really ready for the amount of disruption. And I think we've got, you know, the examples that we've got on Durham Street and Manchester Street have just ruined the perception of what we need to do in roadworks. They are such gold-plated. They're really nice, but there are so many other needs in the city at the moment.
Aaron?
Yeah, I do agree with a couple of the points that have been raised, and that's the only reason I went to speak, is to follow up on Yanni's point around like Worcester Street here and around the park and the upgrades and when they're scheduled for. And I'll just go back to all the way to yesterday to item 11 and what was signed off when the Mayor made a fantastic resolution based around community feedback with intersections and upgrades. So if it does, we get the feedback from the community boards and from the community that they want to see the way we do our prioritisation differently, Yanni will be able to have a say at his community board and say, no, don't spend the money on this street, we want it spent on that street. So just so that's out there again. And I think, what intersection was named in there? I cut myself off.
Okay. Pauline.
Thank you. And the committee did spend a long time on this as well, but I just remind members here today that we're not really talking about budgets and design, we're talking here about timing of the program. And in response to Councillor Johansson, ECAN have not decided to cut 6 routes, they are consulting on that. And I really encourage people to make a submission to them.
Sorry, all 3 options have got the 6 routes gone.
We can people can bring
sorry.
another option through, and
yes, I know, and we will be submitting as a council. I can tell you that here and now.
So we've got to be careful when we just make sweeping statements like that. And we are getting, and I think as might have been Councillor Livingston, or no, I think Councillor Clearwater, we need to have our city ready for a good transport system, which will come, whichever form it takes. And we did question the costings today, but there are, as we know, a lot more costs that appear when we're doing these works, a lot of things that we don't see under the ground, which adds a lot of cost, and we may as well fix those things up and renew them so they have a long life while we're digging the road up. So, and we're also complying with obligations in the AAC that we don't always have any choice over. So we must look around too and see what has been done. We all love the work around the terrace and the Avon River. They're all really expensive. They're gold plated. We don't want bits of the city that don't match. We may decide to do that, and we will be bringing reports back. But I think we've got to put ourselves into the future and say we're doing this now. Should we do a good job for Christchurch? It's starting to look really good. People are commenting daily on how good it's looking. So bear that in mind. But today we're just looking at timing of all this work, not the design and not the budgets for it. That time will come later when the detailed work comes back. So today let's support this committee recommendation to modify the timing, and let's get Christchurch cracking.
Thank you. Very funny. See what he did? See what he did? Yep. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. Yanni Johansson.
And can I call it no, but I want to say that I want to vote for A and C.
Oh. So you want well, hang on. Well, look, I'll put two separately. So, but you want to vote for only two of them.
No, just two separately will be fine.
So two separately. So if I put item 2 notes that before, that's a noting provision anyway. Yeah. Okay. So I'll put 2 separately. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. So that's. But do you oppose 3 and 4 as well? Do you want to support those? Do you want to just record your opposition to 1?
It's just 1.
Yeah. Okay. So Dion and Yanni, opposition to item 1 of the recommendation. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. Right. Well, I'll move that we